Welcome back to the Triax Performance channel. For our regular viewers, you might be asking, where's Rob? Well, we thought he's had too much of his face on the screen lately, so we've given the self-appointed face of Triax a well-deserved break from your screens. For those who don't know who I am, I'm Damon, and I'm 1/3 of the Triax Performance team alongside Rob and Sean. You can contact me on Twitter at Damon Bednarski or via the Triax social media channels at Triax Performance. As always, if you find our content informative or enjoyable and haven't already, please give us a like or subscribe to our channel. We appreciate all and any support we receive. Today, for my debut on the Triax Performance channel, I'll be talking all things smartwatches. In particular, what common metrics they provide and what these values actually mean, and how to interpret them without having gone to uni and completed a science degree. So let's get this show on the road. 10 or 15 years ago, if you were serious about your exercise and activity, if you wanted to measure how far you wanted to run, you'd either have to walk around your oval with the trundle wheel, drive around the block with your car and use the odometer to measure it out, or run on an athletics track. Thankfully, with the addition of the smartwatch, now you can all do it just simply by wearing a watch. So you can track and monitor your running speed, your distance, energy expenditure, heart rate, location, and all sorts of other metrics along the way just by wearing the watch. The specific metrics your smartwatch will provide you will vary depending on the brand and model you own. The more modern versions obviously are going to have more up-to-date software and technology. However, the primary metrics provided by the major smartwatch companies, so you've got Apple, Fitbit, Garmin, Polar, Samsung, they generally all provide the same metrics. There'll just be little differentiations in their equations and algorithms that they use to calculate that. So to help you comprehend these fitness metrics and to get the most out of your smartwatch, I'm going to explain the most common smartwatch metrics and discuss the accuracy and limitations of each. The first and most important watch metric, it's a bit of a no-brainer, is time. Like all good watches, your smartwatch also tells the time. So thankfully, when you wear a smartwatch, you don't have to sit in the kitchen and watch the old analog clock or the oven time to set your watch. You simply just turn it on, link up to your Bluetooth on your phone or your Wi-Fi, and it'll automatically link up to the local time zone. So when you're traveling, moving around, it's always going to be accurate. The second metric I'm going to discuss today is step count. This is something that's pretty popular these days with the 10,000 step goal that a lot of people try to achieve to make sure that they're reaching their physical activity goals. So unlike back in the day, the yellow Cocoa Pops pedometer that you'd get in your cereal box that used a mechanical switch, which if you shake it, you just get extra steps. Your smartwatch uses inbuilt accelerometers to detect movement. So how does a watch on my wrist calculate steps, you might be asking? The inbuilt accelerometers in your watch calculate the movement of your arm, and each swing of the arm is determined to be 2 steps. Now, again, this is fraught with the possibility of inaccuracy because there's often movements that you don't use your arms a lot for if you're pushing something or holding something. So some examples of things where there might be an accuracy in your step count would be if you're pushing a pram, holding shopping bags, or mowing the lawn, and this would normally underestimate your steps as you're holding onto something and your arm movement isn't as frequent. Then there's also non-walking movements that your watch might pick up on. For example, if you're stirring the pot on a stove, brushing your teeth, going over a speed hump, various other just miscellaneous things that happen in your day-to-day life, they will actually estimate that you have been walking. You may actually be seated or just standing and not moving, so that can overestimate your step count. So as you can see, there are some inaccuracies in the step count feature, and you always need to take this value with a grain of salt. Step count's a good lead into the next metrics I'll be discussing, which are distance and pace. Now, for those of you who are runners, these are really important metrics that you want to be getting from your smartwatch, as it tells you how far you've been running, how quickly you've been running, so that you can see your progress in your training and performance. There's 2 primary ways in which distance and pace are calculated. The first of which is GPS tracking, and the second is a metric that uses your stride length, step count, and duration. So the first one I'm going to discuss is GPS tracking. I won't get into the nitty gritty of the GPS tracking system in your watch, but put simply, there's a GPS receiver in your watch which communicates with the GPS satellites in space. It connects up with 3 satellites in space and will determine your position when you're exercising using those satellites. This method is really accurate. So outdoors, there's been found to be somewhere around a zero point 0.6 or less margin for error in distance using the smartwatches. The only flaw in the system is that you cannot actually calculate your distance or pace when exercising indoors, as satellites cannot detect your GPS position while indoors. The second and more arbitrary way of calculating distance and pace using your smartwatch is through the use of algorithms that use your stride length, step count, and the duration of your activity. So when calculating distance using this method, distance is calculated by your stride length times the number of steps during the activity. Now, 2 issues with this calculation is if you haven't manually adjusted your stride length to match your actual stride length, it'll be on the generic one, and that will automatically make your distance calculation inaccurate because it won't be specific to you. The second is that the number of steps taken will be reliant on the validity of your step count feature, as highlighted before, which can be affected by how you move during your steps. Similar to distance, pace is calculated using a formula in this format as well. So pace is calculated using distance divided by the duration to cover the distance. So as highlighted before, if your distance calculation is incorrect due to the inaccuracies of your stride length and step count, then your pace is going to be inaccurate, as your distance value used to calculate how long it took you to cover a distance will be inaccurate. So the best way to get accurate pace and distance is to use the GPS tracking method. If that's not available because the GPS service isn't available, this is a useful second point of call. But again, you have to be careful if you're using this to determine your training, as it can be quite inaccurate. The next metric I'll be explaining is heart rate. Now, heart rate's pretty common and simple. Most people understand what heart rate is, but the way in which it's actually calculated using a smartwatch is a little bit complicated. So I'll be taking you back to school a little bit here and just running you through some basic science concepts that are used to calculate heart rate on smartwatches. So if you've got a smartwatch and you've ever wondered what these green lights underneath your watch are for, that's actually part of calculating your heart rate. So what smartwatches use, I've got a Garmin device, but Apple Watches do the same, is that they actually use a thing called pulse oximetry to calculate your heart rate. So how does pulse oximetry work, you might be asking? So pulse oximetry works on the smartwatch by using a built-in optic sensor to detect how much light is emitted onto your skin. Now, the reason it's a green light is that green light is absorbed by blood. So the way that your watch works in calculating your heart rate is that it will emit green light into your skin and be absorbed by the blood. The amount of blood absorbed is then calculated by the optic sensor as it reflects back into the watch, and then it will determine using an algorithm based on that amount what your heart rate is. So if there's not a lot of blood, then obviously your heart rate's low. If there's more blood there and there's more light emitting, then you're going to have a higher heart rate. However, the major issue with pulse oximetry and using a light to detect heart rate is that there's quite a room for error. So with humans, we've all got different skin tones and colours that influences the accuracy of the heart rate. So if you've got darker skin, it's a lot harder for the light to emit through the skin. So that could also increase your heart rate reading because more light has to be emitted. And similarly, if you've got tattoos or you've got a high BMI, if there's more surface area to get through or the darker toned skin to get through, it's also going to cause inaccuracies in your heart rate readings. So with smartwatches, there's been accounted for about a 20 beats per minute error margin. This is with Garmin. It's pretty similar with the other watches as well. And over time it evens out, but during exercise 20 beats per minute is quite a big difference. So if you're looking for accuracy when it comes to heart rate readings, I'd recommend looking at getting something like a heart rate strap or belt, which goes across the chest and uses electrical impulses rather than light to detect the heart rate, which is a lot more accurate process. The final metric I'm going to discuss in this episode is energy expenditure, or otherwise known as calories burned. This metric is really popular with those who are looking to control or lose weight and is calculated using two primary metrics. So we've got resting calories and active calories. So what are resting and active calories? Resting calories are the number of calories expended while sedentary, so not moving, sitting, laying, in order to sustain life. So essentially keep you breathing and your heart beating. This value is calculated based on your heart rate and VO2 max values during these sedentary periods. Active calories, on the other hand, are the number of calories expended while active or exercising. This value is calculated based on your activity level, so if it's low, moderate, or high intensity, the type of activity performed, and your personal characteristics such as age, gender, height, weight, and heart rate. While energy expenditure is a great metric and it's useful for controlling weight, it's actually one of our most inaccurate values or metrics that you get on a smartwatch. The reason for this is that there's at least 7 variables that go into actually calculating this. So if there's any error in these variables, when you add them together, the inaccuracy of your energy expenditure is going to be expanded. So as mentioned earlier, energy expenditure takes into account your age, gender, height, weight, the movement type, your heart rate, and VO2 max, many of which are actually assumptions that your watch makes already. So while it's a great metric to have and it's cool to see how many calories you burn, if you are using this as a health measure and you need to know how many calories you're burning, I'd recommend using a more accurate system. If you're just keen to see roughly how many calories you're burning during your exercise, then it's not too bad a measure using the smartwatch metric. Well, there you have it. That's my guide to understanding your smartwatch and its metrics. I hope you've got some value out of this video, and as always, if you have any feedback or comments, please get in touch via the Triax socials. We really appreciate it, and every little comment, like, share, and subscribe helps us keep on producing content. Be sure to keep an eye on the Triax channel as well for some content from myself and the Triax team in the near future. Until next time, see you later, and thanks for tuning in.